My name is Isabel, and today I will be discussing and looking at the ways in which we define and measure crimes, as well as taking a look at crime statistics and patterns within Indigenous communities. Because this is such an important matter that could be perceived differently, it's important to fully understand. To begin this discussion, I'd first like to look over what crime actually is, from a culture of fear perspective and from a somewhat stereotype perspective. Crime is crime is terrorism, serial murder, gang violence, stranger rapes, carjackings, random muggings, road rage, going postal, razor blades and Halloween cookies, drive-by shootings, child kidnappings, police brutality, and plane crashes. This perspective is largely due to the media's role in crime and is actually often untrue, as there are very few crimes that are actually rooted in violence. Rather, crime does not have to be so extreme, but is instead an act or omission prohibited by criminal law. It is also interesting to look at some of the origins and applications of this criminal law. I believe, in regards to Indigenous communities, the conflict model applies best because the Canadian government is able to control Indigenous communities by putting in laws that help those who have power to maintain that power. The reason I'm discussing these aspects of crime and why they're so important is because within Canada, there has been multiple statistics looking at police-reported crime in Canada's remote Indigenous majority communities. In an article by the CBC, which is entitled Mischief, Disturbing the Peace Drive High Crime Rates in Remote Communities by Sarah Minogue, this article discusses and refers to the article by Statistics Canada, which is entitled Crime Reported by Police Serving Areas Where the Majority of the Population is Indigenous, 2018, by Mary Ellen, released on November 18th, 2020. Within the CBC article, it starts off by relaying that the study had looked at police-reported crime from 182 detachments that serve communities where over half the population is Indigenous. It then states that the author, Mary Ellen, found that police-reported crime rates were 6 times higher in these Indigenous communities than in non-Indigenous communities, and that violent crime rates in these communities were 9 times higher. But even though these statistics are higher, doesn't necessarily mean that they are true, because the CBC article failed to effectively point out that the statistics are not entirely accurate, as the specific set of Indigenous communities represents only 21% of the Indigenous communities for Canada, and that's only 1% of the Canadian population. That makes up less than 1,500 individuals. However, another interesting aspect that the CBC pointed out was that adult crime was more prevalent than youth crime, which is quite surprising. This is surprising because stereotypically, within Indigenous communities, as a result of there being many young ones, the crimes are typically grouped with those young ones. In this article, though, it states that compared to others, the Indigenous youth's crime rate is 6 times higher than those youth who are non-Indigenous. However, it is also proven in this article that the rates for the accused crimes for adults were 10 times more than youth. Many of these crimes that these ones are performing are not violent crimes, but rather offenses like mischief and disturbing the peace, and those offenses are often associated with mental health problems or substance use or alcohol. The article then ends with stating that offenses related to the administration of justice are also 6 times higher in Indigenous communities. An offense under this matter can include a breach of probation, failure to comply with an order, and failure to appear. But these offenses may not always be the victim's fault. But instead, within some of these communities, it's difficult to access or appear in court for these offenses. That was the end of the article, and reflecting on it, I can see that they were definitely making some good points, and were drawing attention to an important matter. However, I believe that the media still has somewhat changed the true facts, and has instead taken a snapshot of one aspect of it. For example, in the Statistics Canada article, it says, mischief and disturbing the peace are offenses which may be more likely to come to the attention of police in smaller communities. They may also be affected by differences in police practices with respect to the use of provincial violation and municipal bylaws for this type of behavior. This essentially means that it can vary and is not entirely effective. Another aspect to keep in mind is that, as the Canadian Statistic article states, in 2018, the rate of mischief was 15 times higher in Indigenous communities. Mischief, as defined in the Criminal Code, covers a range of criminal behavior, including various kinds of vandalism, such as graffiti, as well as destructive or obstructive behavior. This means that 1/3 of criminal activity was a form of mischief. This could have to do with the fact that there are higher police reported levels in some areas. That in large city, these criminal activities may not always be noticed or dealt with. But because of these Indigenous communities being in rural places, often and are rather small, these activities are noticed more by police officers. It is also important to note some of the differences in police reported rates of mischief and disturbing the peace is a reflection of different police practices across jurisdictions. This means that the data is not entirely correct. The article also fails to mention that some of the mental health issues that may cause Indigenous ones to be more likely to participate in crime may include childhood trauma, experience in residential schools, mental health issues, and heavy drinking. Because of this, within the Truth and Reconciliation Act, the court must recognize and draw special attention to this unique history. However, despite this, there is still some injustice to Indigenous people, specifically in overrepresentation in correctional institutes, as well as renewed focus on police practices despite the Truth and Reconciliation Act. With all of this in mind, we can see that though the CBC article had attempted to express what is happening in regards to crime within Indigenous communities, they were not able to succeed because they did not actually represent what is truly happening in certain aspects, but rather had a snapshot. We can see that in order to accurately understand crime in Indigenous communities, we must look at all aspects. These aspects include looking at society, biology, psychology, the law, as well as socioeconomic and sociological aspects, because criminology is complicated. It's not a simple matter, and it takes a lot to understand it. We also must remember many of these criminal matters are as a result of the social construction of a social problem. Finally, we cannot allow these statistics to impact how we perceive others, because many statements and many of these crimes are not as serious as the media may put them out to be, and they may seem to be initially, and that is as a result of negative framing. In order to stop this, we must make the effort to gain understanding of crimes and how to properly read statistics in order to fully understand and perceive correctly. Thank you for listening. I hope you take this information and find it useful in the future. I've listed the 2 links to CBC and StatCan, which I found very, very beneficial, and I would definitely recommend you reading them to get an even deeper understanding. on this article. And thanks for listening. Have a great day.